they're improving at an astonishingly rapid rate. So we're headed towards a bottleneck, and that'll be what happens in the next video. We're headed towards a distinct bottleneck because in the past, previous technologies were able to cope with growing populations. They were able to cope with the fact that populations are growing, medical technology improves, less and less children die, more and more people live for longer. But they were able to cope with that by introducing technologies that allowed people to create more and raise productivity, so that the average amount that someone could produce in value towards the economy was increased by the use of tools, by the use of technologies. And we were able to keep pace with the growth of the population. The impacts of technology itself, increasing the population and dropping back mortality, was countered by the productivity benefits. And the fact that we could get more people into the workforce, we could actually increase and ramp up. And that's where the whole growth push that's sort of been around since, probably since the turn of the century, but big time since World War II. Bretton Woods Marshall Plan just put that plan into action. The prime game changer that's unprecedented in human history is that this wave of technology, previous waves of technology, just let more people sit in front of PCs, more people fit into factories on assembly lines, more people function around the technologies, printing technologies and so on that were emerging. This range of technology, they don't need you. They don't need me. They need an engineer, some software techs, and that's about it. That's all they need. This range of technologies are learning to learn. The ultimate strategy game, Go, or Pen, which has, hundreds of millions of permutations. You can't memorize it like you can chess. You can't memorize every strategy and how they counter each other the way you can with chess. So the Go champions were beating computer players for a long time, whereas chess players were getting outmatched by computer players. But that wasn't happening with Go because it's got too many permutations. It requires you to learn and be imaginative. Well, guess what's been happening in the last couple of years? Go players have been getting trounced, human Go players, by software, because the software is learning to learn, and it's getting better and better at learning. So we're having intelligent systems and learning systems making their way into our world, right around us, all the time, in our phones, on our computers, in our systems that we're using online. And we are taking them for granted. We're not realizing that as they become more and more functional for us, as they become more and more useful to us, they are also becoming capable of replacing most of us. And I mean most, when I say most, I mean 80% of jobs within the next 30 years they can replace comfortably, probably less. But listen, the Pew Report, when it first came out, 2011, 2012, the first time I read the Pew Report, I think it's been around before then, they estimated that 40% of jobs in 2011 would be gone by 2040. And then they ramped it up in 2018 to 60% of jobs would be gone by 2040. And the latest estimate is somewhere between 75 and 80% of jobs that currently exist will be gone by 2040. Now, I think that might be a little harsh in terms of the date. Might be 2045, might be 2050. But it could easily be 2040. Jesus, if it speeds up even further, it could be 2035. The reality is that things like this COVID crisis have a tendency, as I've said before, to put a shot of steroids into the whole process. We're entering a massive recession. The deeper the recession, the more that financial capital is looking for ways out. The more that financial capital is looking to avoid a disaster of this nature ever again. If they live to be 150, they never want to see this shit again. And how do they do it? How have they always done it? Always. Technology. Technological innovation and massive investment in that technology. So we have a tidal wave of these systems, these intelligent systems, these learning systems, which work independently of human operators, and are entering untold numbers of employment sectors at an ever-increasing rate. So the cache of jobs, which is why we're hitting a bottleneck, and we're going to see that bottleneck lengthen and narrow over time, the cache of available jobs contracts, but the population's growing. So it's not like suddenly we're going to stop having humans. We're not. We're going to keep having humans. And those humans are going to keep living for longer and longer and longer too. We forget that. The technology to extend life is one of the fastest growing technologies on the planet. Probably the fastest, to be honest, along with, if you include all my biotech and medical. And it's not going to be long before people are living 2-3 times as long as they do now. You'll live to see it. I'll probably live to see it. And then who knows after that? And more people. So even if the population drops as people sophisticate and become more affluent, they have less children. That makes sense. As we live longer, we'll have less children. But population growth isn't going to stop anytime soon. It may slow over time, but we're still looking at 10 to 12 billion by the end of the century at least. So that's a problem, because you've got these diminishing numbers of jobs being fully occupied, fully colonized by technologies. But we don't have a commensurate slowdown of the population, not at the same rate. We won't see a significant enough slowdown of the population until the end of the century or later. And so more and more people are going to be squeezed out of the market. And all I see governments is doing is becoming caretakers to capital, caretakers to big capital, in terms of keeping the peace, in authoritarian creep to control an increasingly unhappy, for good reason, society. And people being lied to over and over again, being told that they're doing well, we're doing better than ever, we're doing great, everything's fantastic. Haven't we heard those words before in multiple countries? When we know that we're not, and that we aren't doing great, most of us aren't anyway, and that things have been downturning in many respects for the lower echelons, but now increasingly the upper working class and middle class. There's a hollowing out of the middle class that's been atrocious in the last 15 years. We need to be ready for the lies, ready for the misrepresentation. We need to be ready for the fudging of figures, and we need to be ready for governments to assert their will on us instead of responding to ours. Now, the next video I'm going to do will be on the specific nature of some of the changes in education, in relationships, in education, in production, and so on. I'm going to go into some real specifics and touch on that. That will probably take at least 2 videos. I'll probably spread that out over a couple of videos, and how our lives are going to change as a result of that, and what we can do, what we can target ourselves, point ourselves into the future, orientate ourselves towards futures that will be better for us overall. Because ignoring it, pretending it's not happening, hoping for the best, that's not going to fly. It's not going to work. We will need to both be intelligent and canny in our personal lives and our private lives, and we'll probably need to collectivise to some degree as well to avoid the kind of authoritarian creep and bully tactics that I see coming down the pipe in the fairly near future. Cheers, guys. We'll talk again soon.